We are talking about the 2016 horror movie, The Possession Experiment. This one is directed and co-written by Scott B. Hansen, who co-wrote this with Mary Dixon. Stars Chris Minor as the kind of our main character. You've also got an appearance by Bill Moseley. I've seen his name kind of advertised on some of the kind of other marketing material for this as the main star, but he's only ever actually in one scene at the beginning of the movie. So don't be expecting too much of Mr. Moseley. So this movie actually, I think, has quite a neat premise. Now, it focuses on this university student who is very studious, and he is doing some type of paper for his theology class, and he is investigating demon possessions and kind of exorcisms and stuff. So he enlists the help of this kind of slacker classmate and goes to investigate a local possession story, an unsolved police case. And he kind of visits this particular kind of house where this apparent possession kind of took place. And then the interesting part of this story, what actually happened is, and the bit where I feel this movie almost has a kind of a unique flair here, is what this guy decides to do. He actually decides to try and get possessed himself and live stream it to try and prove the existence of demons, exorcisms, etc. So he kind of, with the help of this kind of his kind of slacker friend and this kind of nurse, they kind of get to help them and stuff, and they get hire a spiritualist and stuff. And what he wants to do is he finds this kind of Ouija board in his particular house, and he ultimately wants to try and open himself up to demonic possession, document it, and then hopefully kind of prove the existence of it, and ideally get kind of like exercise at the end of it. So it's quite a neat premise, I feel, because I don't feel it's this kind of, it's certainly an interesting setup, and I don't feel has been this particular kind of story has been sort of told before. So that was some area of originality in this one. Now this movie's actually got a very low rating on IMDb. It's like 3.1 or something along the lines of that. So I was checking it earlier on. It's a very low score, which I feel is somewhat unfair, but I think I know why, and I'll come on to it. So let's talk about, first of all, what I felt worked with this movie. So I've got to say, I thought the production design here was actually pretty good. You know, it's a lower budget indie movie, but I've got to say, I thought the production design here was actually on the fairly high side. I've got to say, I thought it had quite slick production values. There's a variety of kind of locations. There's quite a kind of, there's a good amount of cast members here. The special effects are quite plentiful and actually pretty good. There's a little bit of kind of CGI blood, and there's one or two kind of like less than stellar practical effects, but for the most part, the special makeup, the kind of the gore was all very good. And speaking of gore, there is quite a lot of it. This is actually has quite plentiful amounts of gore, but it's not kind of like American Guinea Pig amounts of kind of gore, but nonetheless, it's there are some quite disturbing scenes. One in particular where a woman literally rips off her own jaw. So that's pretty grim. So there are some pretty sort of like good amounts of gore on display here, and a surprisingly high body count for a possession movie, which tends to be on the kind of the lesser side of the kind of the body count in these sort of films. I actually thought our central cast was pretty good. I mean, I think our main guy's a little bit miscast, which we'll come on to, but I didn't think they were necessarily bad actors. Certainly our kind of our main two, and the female kind of nurse only really comes into it about halfway, but the three of them are all pretty good. I especially like the kind of the slacker guy, because he just really comes across like that's really what he's like. That may well be the actor's real kind of character, but he just kind of felt like he was this guy who just gets kind of swept along because he's providing recreational drugs. That's kind of the only reason why he's here, and he just wants to kind of team up with this guy who's very good at his job, you know, his studies and stuff to get the grade. But his character actually does feel like he really is kind of that real kind of type of character. So he was pretty good. And like I've said, the story tries to have a couple of kind of twists in it, which we'll come on to. So there's a reasonable amount going on here. There's fairly ambitious with its plot, and certainly an original idea. So there's quite a lot of positives here. But where do I feel this movie falls down in certain areas. There's one big one which I'm going to save just till last, but a couple of small ones first of all. So I've mentioned the cast are fairly good, but there are some peripheral characters here which are quite poorly acted. For example, that we have this guy's father, who I feel is quite unfortunately not particularly good performance, and we have a few minor sort of characters that are not the best actors. There are also, I feel, some characters which are a little undeveloped. We suddenly are introduced to a bunch of police characters towards the end of the movie, but it's too late at that point to really going to get much to them. They seem to have a lot of camera time right in the kind of the closing kind of sort of 10 minutes of the movie, but we've never seen them before. So some of the character work here was not the best in regards to some of the acting, some of the kind of the camera work, and our female lead, I feel she was introduced a little late, because again we are meant to believe there's this burgeoning kind of romance between our two leads, and she's introduced a little bit too late in the game, I feel, to really have a believable kind of deep connection with the with the other two. And she's like, oh, we got to try and help our friends. And like, you don't even know these people, you've only met them like once or something like that. Anyway, so there is that. Our main actor, who Chris Minor, who plays this guy, now at the beginning of the movie we kind of led to believe his character is somewhat of a loner, a bit of a kind of just a bit of a bookworm, and kind of very kind of socially awkward. But the guy they cast is like, kind of quite like a handsome dude, if you know what I mean. So the character that he's portraying doesn't really feel like the casting was that particularly spot on. So yeah, I mean, we would have had someone a little bit more plain looking, if you ask me. So there is that. Now, where I feel this movie has probably lost a lot of people is there is a major plot contrivance that happens in the third act. To me, the third act is where this movie lets itself down, although it's not without its exciting bits. So the first act, we have the setup, and we have quite an extended sort of scene at the beginning of the movie of the original possession, which is very good. And then we have the interesting sort of setup where this guy who wants to do this possession experiment, I think, was great. It's a great idea. So the first two arcs of this story, the first two acts, have some really good elements. Then we come to our third act, and there is a plot reveal that links a character to the original possession, and it's just so contrived. It's just ridiculous how much of a convenience this is. Now, it could have been written, I feel, like if they wanted to go that way, there should have been more of a connection earlier on, I felt. But it just seems very arbitrary that this guy just happens to decide he wants to do a demonic possession study, and he happens to find this one case where he actually has some type of connection with. It's really jarring, and I definitely feel that is the point where this movie has lost a lot of viewers and a lot of points on the kind of things like IMDb. But they double down on it again when they introduce another character. And again, this is meant to be like the second plot twist, so I won't reveal. And oh look, creepy evil looking guy actually turns out to be evil. What a shocker! And the kind of like that reveal is just kind of, it's too obvious in the way that the kind of the lighting and the kind of the makeup and stuff like that. It's very, very obvious. So the third act for me is a little bit of a mess, because I feel it drops the ball quite a lot on that third act. And for a pretty decent kind of like possession setup, the bit that basically has Bill Moseley, that was good, and a really kind of interesting idea in regards to the actual kind of live streaming, the experiment and stuff like that. And that's all quite fun because people don't believe what they're seeing; they all think it's fake. And that to me was the real the winning part of this movie, because it's kind of something that they haven't seen before, and I wish they had done a little bit more with that. Maybe they wanted to kind of up the ante, because it ends up being very popular and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. And it just squanders the third act by having silly reveals and it going into kind of like full-on movie massacre, and some of the effects in that's basically the kind of the effects in the last act are not as good as the first act in regards to what happens. So it's certainly not a bad film, and I feel the first 2 acts have some real strong elements in there, but it's let down on the 3rd act. But I feel it's still, there's enough here not to kind of lowball it with like a 3 out of 10. I feel that's that's a little bit unfair. I will say I'll give it a 5 out of 10, which is about an average review for me, because I do feel there's enough here, I feel, and enough originality and stuff going on to, I feel, to appeal to many sort of possession movie fans and stuff like that. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.